Welcome to Prestige Class, the first interview that we are doing where we sit down and talk to a creator, somebody in the tabletop industry who we think we could learn something from, who we think other people might be able to learn something from, to dive into their design process, the work they do, maybe a couple projects they have upcoming, and just talk about the lessons they've learned along the way as the creator. Today we have a person who I call the unofficial King of Kickstarter, and I think he grimaces a little bit every single time that I do, but it's Phil Reed, who is CEO of Steve Jackson Games, which we'll talk about a little bit. But the main thing that I want to chat with Phil about is the absolutely mind-blowing amount of games that he puts out on Kickstarter, that he consistently funds, consistently fulfills in typically about a month. He did 12 Kickstarters last year during 2020. He already has completely funded one this year, and I think is finishing up fulfillment right now if he hasn't already finished it, and is getting ready to launch another one. If you've never joined us before, we're Plus One EXP. Our entire focus is helping independent tabletop creations get better exposure into creating content that helps people explore indie tabletop games. We are a odd little brand that multi-classed in tabletop game design, beard and skincare alchemy, and the Bardic College of Content Creation. You can find us at Plus One EXP across all platforms, or check out what we do at plusoneexp.com. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to get to talk with Phil, to learn about him. If you are watching live, whether that's on YouTube, Facebook video, or Twitch, you are welcome to type in questions you have for Phil in the chat. I've got some earlier from a few other people, and I also have my questions as well. But rather than me telling you who he is and him sitting there awkwardly, I'm going to kick things over to Phil to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about who he is, what he does, his background, and you know, what some of his favorite things are, because I know he has a lot of things that he deeply enjoys that we may touch on this time during this conversation also. So Phil, tell people a little bit about who you are.
Okay, as you said, I'm Phil Reed. I am CEO of Steve Jackson Games. I've been working with Steve Jackson Games for over 20 years now. I started working professionally in the game industry around 94. 95 was my first professionally published work. I did a little bit of writing for the West End Games Star Wars RPG, just a couple small little pieces in that. And then most of my initial work in the earlier years was project management, art, layout, simple things like that. And then 2002, I took a stab at PDF publishing. And after a couple of years of just doing that on the side, I quit at Steve Jackson Games to go do that full time until 2007, when Steve's like, hey, you should come back and do this some more. And I've been there ever since.
That's awesome. There are so many things that I am excited to talk about, but I think I just want to start with this. And it's one of the questions that I certainly had on my list, but our good friend Bez also wanted to know. And that's that in one of the groups I shared, that you have publicly stated a couple of times that you do Kickstarters to relax, that you enjoy doing Kickstarters, which is, I would say, probably the opposite experience that most people have when they're thinking about running a Kickstarter. And so let's start there, and then maybe we'll explore some other things. What do you find relaxing about doing a Kickstarter?
I find the engagement with backers to be very fun, and since it's not office work, I can take it less seriously. I'm only affecting myself if it doesn't succeed. So I'm better able to take risks. I can just try different things. And I'm a big fan of doing something new as often as I can. So Kickstarter's given me that tool that I never had before, just to throw it out there and say, what do you think? So for me, that's fun. And as soon as it becomes no longer fun, I won't do personal Kickstarter projects, because I have enough stress in my life without turning what's essentially a entertaining hobby into a stress point.
That's awesome. I love it. And I know that that is something that some creators may be able to embrace or not, depending on where they're at with their process. But I do think that approach, and remembering what is on the line, you're not necessarily letting other people down, or there's other things, which depending on the scale of the Kickstarter may shift. I think kind of perspective is just incredibly helpful. So let's talk a little bit about some of the projects that you've done. Do you know off the top of your head how many projects you've done on Kickstarter to date?
No.
Ish.
I know it's 30 something personal projects, roughly the same number of projects for the company. I've consulted on a couple of larger projects. I think all in projects that I've either directly managed or spent some time helping somebody set up is probably about 100 at this point.
It's a lot. So if you were going to maybe give somebody who is approaching a Kickstarter for the first time, if you were going to kind of just give them a couple of key points of wisdom from those 100-ish campaigns, 30 of you, a third of your own, a third for the company, and then a third of just helping some other people, what are the things that you might give somebody advice on?
The biggest things I would say is start small. You might have a big, like, grand idea for a new project, but that is a terrible first Kickstarter project because you're going to screw up. There's going to be mistakes, things are going to go wrong. So starting as small as possible so you can learn is good. If you can make it a digital only project, that's even better because then you don't have to have the stress of shipping and manufacturing onto everything.
Awesome. So start small, go digital. If somebody maybe has a couple Kickstarters underneath their belt, but they're looking to do something bigger, what might be another piece of advice that you would give people?
Charge more for shipping than you think you should. And I don't care how many times you go and weigh things and check prices, charge more than you think you should, because shipping is always more expensive than you expect. I still, to this day, mess up on the shipping side constantly. I ran a 24-hour Kickstarter project at the beginning of this month, and fulfillment's done now. Everything's shipped, but shipping costs more than I had expected, and it was 100% on me because cards aren't media mail. Cards are full-class mail. But I messed it up, so it worked out. I didn't lose money on it, but I definitely sunk more into the postage than I had wanted to.
Yeah.
So shipping's a nightmare.
Yeah, I run an e-commerce company. I work with the fulfillment center. I ship things all over the globe, and I'll still eat shipping on my campaign from last year a little bit. Some of that was planned in, and some of it wasn't. Like, it's just, you can never tell what's going to do. There are some cool things. If people are shipping packages out there, there's some cool things that FedEx just did. On any package that is below 7 pounds, you can get a flat rate on it no matter what. And I think FedEx and USPS are typically your two best bets, though not always. It's definitely worth looking around at some of the different options out there. But yeah, knowing media mail rules, especially in zine culture, has been a big part of the conversation and a big part of what can oftentimes catch people. But I love that. Starting small, going digital, and charging more for shipping than you think. I think especially for early creators is really helpful. Now, I think something that's also really unique about a lot of your projects, you don't do a lot of marketing. Now, you've built a really solid reputation, right? You've done the work, which I think is the number one things people need to pay attention to. Is flashy campaigns are great, but doing the work consistently helps move that ball forward. So you don't run Facebook ads for your projects. You don't do all these other things. Some of that might make it feel more like work, but you've kind of seen success. What are some of the best inroads you've seen in kind of helping grow awareness of your projects, or just getting the word out for a small project for a first-time creator that may not cost a lot?
I think the biggest one is consistency and, when possible, over-deliver. On several of my projects, when I'm able to, I'll send out like extra PDFs, like bonus stuff that wasn't even part of the campaign. But when a project does so much better than I could even imagine, I feel like it's my responsibility to thank everyone by, like, here's an extra 20-page PDF or 12-page PDF, whatever, just a little tiny bonus. I did a Troika campaign in December that ended up, I figured it'd be like 100 backers or something, and it was like 300, so that's awesome. So while the project was going on, I stumbled across some public domain art. There's a couple really good tools out there that give you access and allow you to download work. I'm trying to remember which one it was that I had used for that project. Oh, the Art Institute of Chicago. They have an entire section of their site with artwork up there, and there's a public domain tag that you can click on, and it will only show you art that is free to use. And they've got guidelines on there, like what they want you to do in order to use it commercially. So I stumbled across some really cool art in there. So as the Troika project was going on, I wrote another Troika PDF and just made it a bonus for everybody. Awesome. And tossed it in there.
Awesome. I love it. I want to actually talk about some of your projects in just a second. Before we do that, you've done a lot of experiments with Kickstarters. You've tried a lot of different things, and that's, you know, and you know, like I said, I've followed your personal projects for quite a while. I think I have 25 of the 30 projects that you've run. I missed the last one. I was very upset because I didn't realize it was 24 hours. But I'll be picking that up from Drive Through RPG or wherever it ends up after it's all fulfilled. So I'm super excited for it still. Philip Reed projects and Adam Voss projects constantly go back and forth for who has the most projects in my personal library. But you've done a lot of different things. You've done, you know, dollars, you've done PDFs, you've done, you know, POD through Drive Through RPG, personal fulfillment, you know, getting them printed and shipping them out. I know you've got a couple projects in the works that are new in different formats that you're looking at. What are maybe some of the experiments that you've tried that either didn't work the way you thought they would, or that an experiment that you didn't know you were trying but ended up paying off dividends? What are some of the things that you've kind of done to finesse that system that you've seen work out in a way that was really satisfactory for you?
The dollar PDF project that I ran late 2019, it was like October or so, was the first one, A Dozen Sinister Rumors, I think. And that was just me saying, okay, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, I was creating this dozen series of PDFs. They were inexpensive. Let's see what happens if I do that today. And I chose the dollar reward for that one because it wasn't about making a lot of money from a handful of people. I wanted to see how many people would be willing to jump on board a project that's only $1. And by the end, it was, I think, close to 2,000 backers, 1,700, something like that. I don't remember the exact number. And they received 17 different 14-page PDFs for their buck.
Yeah. And
it may not sound like that would pay off well on my end, but after I did the math, it was like $75 an hour that I had earned for doing that work, and I enjoyed doing the work.
Yeah. And though I know this isn't necessarily your focus, it does, again, that's that thing of you've built a really solid reputation for delivery, for doing extra, for like going that extra mile like you talked about. And then also there's all those people who are now following your projects, who are going to get a notification when something goes live, who are fans of your work and who got 17 products for $1. So even if like they come back for something else that looks like it's a little bit more expensive, then it's totally worth the investment on balance also too, which I think is just a phenomenal tool. I know that it wasn't surely a marketing gimmick, or wasn't even necessarily considerably a marketing gimmick, but I do think anybody out there who was paying attention should have walked away with, oh, I could have that many backers following my campaigns in the futures if I can do this kind of work. So we're talking today with Phil Reed. Phil is the CEO at Steve Jackson Games, but the reason we're talking to him is more about the work that he has done over the course of the last decade, just really kind of pursuing new ideas around digital delivery, around Kickstarters. He put out 12 personal Kickstarters last year, in addition to the work that he does at SJ Games. He says he does Kickstarters to relax. If you're just joining us and you have a question, feel free to type it down in the chat below, no matter what platform you are watching on. We'd love to ask Phil any of the questions that y'all have also too. So we've talked a lot about kind of your experience on Kickstarter, putting some of those pieces together. I want to talk a little bit more about your creative process, because in addition to the reality that you're able to do those Kickstarters, you are consistently putting out that content. Like, you are consistently pulling and putting together enough content to run 12 Kickstarters and fulfill them right away, not just run them, consistently run them, and maybe eventually fulfill them. But you get notifications, I think oftentimes from Kickstarter, that, hey, you should follow up with your backers when you've already fulfilled a project to everyone. Like, everyone's already got it in their hands.
Yes, I've multiple emails come in that say, you should let the backers know where everything's at. And I'm like, but it was delivered last month is where it's at.
Right. Which I love. And so let's talk a little bit about your creative process. And again, are you just somebody who, like, as you have ideas, like, where do you think your ideas come from? And then how do you know when to move forward with an idea, I think, is the big easiest starting question.
I move forward with basically every idea, whether it's good or bad. What happens, though, is only those ideas that I am excited enough about to actually move to either close to finished or to a finished state come out and see the public. For example, this is a really good example. And I've got a game I've been working on. It isn't that I'm not excited or inspired, it's that I'm only dedicating so much time to it as it like gels. Let me share my screen. As it gels inside my head a bit. Not sure if this is working.
Yep.
So what I had was an idea for a competitive RPG, one player against the GM. So what I've done here is I've been building a game that is designed around, you're the sole survivor of an adventuring party. And you're somewhere deep in the dungeon when the last person dies. So for example, here we have loot the bodies of your companions. Part of what you will do at the start of the game when you create your character is lift as much stuff off your dead friends as you can manage. And your goal is to get out of the dungeon. Let me scroll down here. And the GM's job is to construct the dungeon that you're in. And I've been experimenting with the idea of zone difficulty, so you can actually set a challenge level for the game. And the harder the game is for the player to escape, the more stuff they're given. And ultimately, at the end of the game, the goal is for one of the players to win the game.
That's awesome.
I don't even know what we were talking about to get me down that path.
Just your creative process, where the ideas come from, how you know when to move forward was, I think, the big thing that we were talking about.
A lot of it's just waking up inspired or something triggering inspiration. A good example of that is the Kalo's Book of Monsters project that I did for the Mjorkborg role-playing game. And that's currently at print now and expected to finish around the 22nd of February, and we'll start shipping then. But that project came about because I woke up one morning and said, I've got an idea, and I just started working at it. And I was really disappointed because I didn't finish right away. But within about 3 weeks of I have an idea, I had the hardcover sample in my hands.
That's cool.
And usually how it works when I get an idea that I just have to get out of my head, I get it out quickly.
Yeah.
So this was originally going to be a part of my first Mjorkborg Kickstarter campaign. But then when I got the sample in from Mixam, I was disappointed because of the hardcover. It's not that it's a bad hardcover, it's that you can get better hardcovers. So instead what I did was pulled it out to make its own separate campaign so I could go to Taylor Printing in Dallas, who I've used for some toy books over the years. And that would allow for sewn binding, better quality, and just generally a better book than what I could have done. Mixam's great. If you want to do hardcovers, they can totally do it. I just get kind of snobby at times about paper qualities and bindings and things like that.
Uh,
But that one actually is a good one to also discuss the creative process.
yeah, let's talk about that.
Share this.
And that's Morkborg. Morkborg's actually their SRD and the way that they are looking to get people to support people who are creating content for Morkborg is actually very impressive. I've been really impressed with the model that they put together for that.
It almost feels similar to the Troika.
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
So this, the way this worked was I constructed the pages in Photoshop, brought them into InDesign, and then wrote to the spaces. And a lot of times the way that works is as I'm writing, it will change what I need happening on that page spread. So I'll go back into Photoshop, make changes, come back to InDesign, write some more, and it just slowly builds. But each one of these spreads is 2 Photoshop files and then the InDesign text. So for me, since I am so visual in just the way I think, I build visual outlines basically.
So you start by going to the book. Like you're not creating a Google Doc and deciding, hey, like eventually I want to give this to somebody to do layout or take this to a layout place. You're starting with, here's the general overall layout structure of the book I want, and now I'm going to start plugging these pieces in.
Yes.
That's awesome. And you source, you're not an artist as far as I know. You, as far as fine art or drawing, you source a lot of your art from some really interesting places. We already talked about the kind of public domain places that you're tapping from, but you'll use stock art a lot of the time in a way that does not ever feel to me like, oh, this is repetitive stock art or anything else like that, because you're pulling from a lot of great sources. So tell me a little bit about how you decide, where to get art from, or are you just kind of constantly accumulating things that you may want to use?
I'm constantly keeping my eyes open for art. Drive-through RPG is actually a great place to find some incredible stock art. And then iStock Photo, Shutterstock. Shutterstock has more good, like incredible art hiding on it than people realize. And a lot of times the way you find that art isn't by a search. It's by finding one image by an artist and then figuring out, oh, this person has 300 pages of images on Shutterstock, and you might be on page 18 before you find something you really like, but you just have to be persistent. For example, this Fantasy City Sites book that I put together, the cover is from Shutterstock. I don't know if you can see. Is it working? Am I presenting okay?
Yep.
Cool.
Oh wait, no, hold on. It's yeah, it's working fine.
So this spread, on the left side, we've got a piece of Dean Spencer stock art from Drive-Thru RPG. On the right side is stock art from Shutterstock. These are both Dean Spencer. The left side is Shutterstock. The right side, I actually don't remember the artist. I'd have to go back and look at the credits, but I think that one's Drive-Thru RPG. Same here. And this Fantasy City Sites book came about because I actually started stumbling into these building images that I just thought looked really cool. And when I figured out there were enough of them, I said, okay, let's just go ahead and build a book that's 16 different city sites.
Yeah.
And I created a second one after that, and this is a good example of the visual outline process, because this shows how I've been building all the pages and preparing them to add text for a third book in the series.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that book is one of those books. Not one of the city books. I've got the Book of Dungeon Encounters right here, though. So.
But exact same process.
Yeah.
Is that one stitched?
Do what?
That one saddle stitched?
Yes.
Awesome. So that's Mixam.
Yeah. No, and like I said, it's been absolutely phenomenal. Just kind of watch. You'll have these projects. You'll maybe toss a couple pages up to just tease us all and get us excited, and then we never know how quickly. And I think everybody's constantly surprised by how quickly it'll go from you showing us one or two of these pages to all of a sudden, oh, there's a Kickstarter project up, and I'm already, I'm launching this out into the world. I know currently you're teasing out a couple different things. One, before we talk about Tower of Scoundrels, which I absolutely want to get to, is this new accordion fold book that you're working on. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yes. So I was trying to think of other formats, like what other physical object could I be creating as an RPG supplement? And I wasn't sure if I could find somebody who could actually manufacture an accordion book. So I hit Alibaba. I talked to a couple different factories. Actually, let me grab the failed test. Because that's the thing. I don't always show all the things I'm working on because some of them are no good. But so an accordion book, and this is just a blank sample, so it doesn't really help understand, is basically designed as two covers that are held together by the pages inside them. Right. And this one is the failed test because the factory, turn that over, glued two pieces together, so you get a seam right down the center there. So that one's a reject. I may go back and talk to that factory at some point in the future and just explain, no, that doesn't work, but that wasn't the goal. And this one is the successful test, and it's not only successful because they used a single piece to connect the two covers, they used the heavier stock that I wanted for the covers. They used the heavier interior stock. So generally it's just much better. And they sent me photos yesterday of the sample with the actual printing on it, and I'll have that next week. So this is a little tough to explain without any sort of marks, but what you have here is it's designed so you open it like a book, and then you turn the page like a book, and then when you close it, the second cover is here, which you can also open like a book and go all the way through, and then when you get to the end and close it, you actually get the first cover again, and the sequence repeats.
Yeah.
So infinite loop that you can just page your way through. As long as you treat it like a book, you can always do this.
Right. Now, is the project you're working on for this, is that infinite loop concept going to play into that at all, or is that just a fun
it's just
idea?
I designed it as two spell books, one of sacred spells and one of unclean spells, so kind of like evil versus good, and they're on opposite sides. And of course, the evil spells have more pages, because the way this is designed, one side has 6 pages because it's the inside of the covers.
Right.
And the other one only gets 4 pages because it's got those 2 covers on that side.
Yeah. No, I immediately when I saw that project, there were a couple things that came to mind, but just even like I was thinking immediately about like Fall of Magic, the storytelling game where you're working your way across the map. How interesting it would be to do some like page-to-page stuff. Like, it's one of the reasons I love following your projects, is it's not just, hey, like I see him doing interesting things with Kickstarter, or the quality of the project, or how quickly you deliver, all the other things that I love about them. It's actually watching the design process, watching things you're trying, and then letting that kind of trigger ideas in my own brain. And you're somebody who I love because you're constantly showing your work to other people, which helps build everybody up. Right now there has been, I'm sure you're familiar with it, this week, a big conversation about like, what is a zine? And I don't want to talk about that conversation right now.
When I saw that entire conversation happening, I was very tempted to try and flag the Tower of Scoundrels project as a Zine Quest project and see if it would work.
Yeah.
just because the number of. But the one of the things on the Accordion book that I'm starting to experiment now, though, is the idea of an entire RPG in here,
Yeah.
where the 6-page side is the GM book, and then the 4-page side is the player book. So that's the thing I don't want to forget, and I just keep making notes because I think there's a fun idea in that.
Yeah. That sounds like an absolute blast because, again, one of the other things it almost evokes is a GM screen type look to it, even if that's not the intention. And so you'd be able to put things out in front of you. And I love it when materials can influence design. During that entire conversation, part of me wanted to like cut an apple in half, like run a string through the back of it and just write with Sharpie marker, "Is this a zine?" on the inside and post that picture online. Because there are people who would be very satisfied by that type of zine, and there are other people who would be irate about it, which just seems silly. But I mean, like, the reality is, the folio book that you're talking about would still essentially fit if it was the right dimensions within Zine Quest guidelines. Technically, there's a lot that can be done in that, and I think embracing experimentation is good. And zine culture is historically very good at experimenting with that reality. And Kickstarter does such a hit or miss job right now of enforcing any of that. As great of a job as they do, and as thankful as I am to the games department at Kickstarter for all their hard work. So let that not be a complete negative. But yeah, I just think that's such an interesting conversation.
The experimentation and watch people try different things.
Yeah. And I think Make 100 is a phenomenal space for that. I think there's a lot of cool ways and times at which we can bring that in. The Break Kickstarter would be another example of a time where it's like, hey, let's think about things in an entirely different way. And I think as we continue to grow and see things change, when I reached out to the people at Kickstarter about like, hey, what are the plans for Zine Quest in the future? Because this year everyone was freaking out about it not being announced. And I'm like, but they've emailed numerous people and said it's happening. Also, it's been going on for 2 years now. Other projects that they've done every year don't get big fanfare until a couple of weeks before it happens because they do it every year and they assume people know. Whether that's a good assumption or not is not. But they were like, no, it's here to stay. But they said they will change the rules if enough creators tell them, hey, here's what our thoughts are. And so I think there's an important conversation to be had there, especially around how are we encouraging experimentation within this event where you're going to see a lot of unique and new creators come in for the first time.
I really hope they run Break Kickstarter again, though, because I didn't participate last time, but I know what I want to do this next time.
Oh man, are you going to tell us? Or are you going to keep that? Is that?
I want to reverse stretch goal. I want to have a project goal, but then have anti-stretch goals where when a certain dollar level is met, I actually remove something from the project.
I love that idea.
This weird sweet spot of balance where people are like, oh, I don't want to back this because it's getting worse. And
that's hilarious. Yeah.
And it feels to me like a perfect Break Kickstarter sort of approach.
It does. And like I said, I think for somebody who is approaching Kickstarter with a sense of like, I want to enjoy this and I want to have fun, and I'm like, that's the perfect person to say, hey, I don't care. I'm going to make my project worse. And the fun thing is, if people get mad about that, they'll back out, which will remove that stretch goal, and then, or that reverse stretch goal, and then pop it back up. And so it's going to be this constant reality. I think that's super fun. Yeah.
I think it'd be great.
No, I think that's phenomenal. Let's talk a little bit about Tower of Scoundrels specifically. One of the reasons I think I'm so excited about this project specifically for you is just knowing your love of vinyl and records, and knowing the projects that you put out and watching all the different things you've done, and getting to watch you do a project that brings a whole bunch of things that I know you enjoy into one central space has been, like, just as somebody who's a fan, really exciting for me for you in this moment. So tell us a little bit about Tower of Scoundrels, what it is, and kind of what people can expect from that project.
So this is my first attempt at actually creating a vinyl record, and for that matter, creating my own music. It's something I've wanted to do for years. Let me just actually share. I've wanted to do this a long time. I have some friends who make music, and they encouraged me to like learn GarageBand. So I'm like, all right, let's do this. And there is no way I'm ever going to learn GarageBand. It's just not going to happen. I don't know why, but my brain does not work with GarageBand. And then sometime it was like in late October, late October, one of my friends told me about Soundtrap, which is a new online tool for constructing and composing music using loops, sound effects. I actually bought this adorable little MIDI keyboard that plugs right into the computer and amazingly works directly with the browser-based program, which shocked me because I thought for sure I'd have to install something or do something, work perfectly. And I've got to tell you, piano chords on this are way easier than piano chords on this. But then I took a couple months, and while I was working on the music side, I was working on the adventure side. A big chunk of the work on the first book, so what we have here on the screen is the 2-panel gatefold that is the album sleeve. And I'm actually going to be upgrading this to a 3-panel. I finished talking to the record producer, the label, about that. And 3 panels totally good to go. So I'll be able to have some more space to put some GM facing stuff, because this will also serve as a mini GM screen when it's all up and running. But a good chunk of my Thanksgiving was actually spent writing the first book that is in the project. And what this is the description of a tower and all the different characters, how they react to the PCs invading their location. And then the second book is what is below the tower. And of course, the key to get below the tower, you don't get till you're at the top of the tower, because, I mean, it's an adventure. You know how these things work. You got to fight your way to the top so you can get underneath it and find the good stuff. And as time went on, I actually came up with a couple of music tracks that I'm proud of that worked out well. I was pointed to the SoundCloud mastering tools that I had never used before, and I got to learn all about how audio mastering can just really make my work sound better. But then I also sent the files to an audio engineer for vinyl mastering, because what do you know? There are different secrets and arts. And I paid him to do the work, and they came back and it was like, oh, wow. After what he had done, it really sounds great. And he didn't change anything that I did. He just adjusted the wavelength of everything to help like the right things punch through, and so it wouldn't be spiking too hard. But it's been a fascinating experience and just learning how to do this.
Awesome. Do me a favor and stop screen sharing for me, so I switch us back to people seeing us.
Sure.
And no, you're good. No, I got to cruise through the module. You shot me a preview link. I'm super excited. It's smart. It's well done. I have played Morkborg once last week. I've read the book a number of times. We died. I mean, that's as one does in Morkborg. But it absolutely, I loved the hooks. I loved the guide through, and I listened to the music going on in the background when I was doing it, the digital files, and it's excellent. Like it's super enjoyable. It hits the theme. I think Morkborg has it's got this really like metal, like, vibe and ethos to it. And I was really interested to see what the music was going to be like, if we were going to get, some Phil Reed metal. And it certainly isn't metal, but it certainly catches the feel of the tower. It's got this really great kind of ethereal fantasy quality that comes in like low underneath, and it's a really solid project. And again, like I said, for me, it was also part of the excitement of just being able to see someone whose work I love get to work on a project in a new medium and watch you grow your skills. And I think, again, the fact that you constantly share your work with other people is something that I deeply appreciate. I think a lot of other people out there do. Also, Jeremy, who's watching right now, wants you to do some Troika Wave next. That's his hope, is that you're gonna oh wait, you're gonna pull that file up now?
We can actually help him with that. Let me give you
a little taste.
A link to the playlist for what is specifically designed around a Troika album. I don't know what the best way to leave links is.
You could. There's a chat here, which I can grab if you want to. You can Facebook message to me also. Either way.
So this is 2 tracks. It's again designed as a 7-inch 45 RPM. Side 1 is the Golden Sailed Barge, and side 2 is Between the Spheres. And what I'm working on is a book of encounters that GMs can use for when the players are traveling between the spheres in a Troika campaign.
That's awesome. So
give it as cosmic encounters with weirdness.
That's awesome. I'm super excited about it. I'm super excited about that. Troika is another one that I've read through numerous times. I actually own, I think I don't have the most recent Troika Miscellaneous Art Council book, but I'll get it soon. And I've got, I was really happy when I had bought more Troika than I had ever bought Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Not that everybody can love whatever games they love,
right.
You know, but I was super excited to reach that singularity point earlier this year. And so I love Troika. I love getting to the concept of it. I just haven't been able to sit down and play it yet, and I'm super excited. And I love like that concept of traveling between spheres, and we're seeing more happen with travelogue games, how we transition from one space to another. And I actually think that's a big, Troika has been an influence in saying, wait, we're moving between these spaces. What does that look like? How do we experience that in play? And I think it's cool to see people enjoying that. Apparently Jeremy's already listened to the one that you shared with me. He wants more from you in that vein. And he says he's going to send some verses your way no matter what, if you need some vocals for some Troika. I do think it would be fun. One of the things I think would be phenomenal is if we could eventually get some of the RPG Zine crew or some other people to do some collaborative projects. I would love to see more of that, especially this year. I can't imagine that we're not going to top out over 300 Zine Quest projects. I think there's a good chance we may hit 400. We'll see if the funding rate maintains on all those projects at that 90% level, which is kind of mind blowing and wonderful. But I would love for people to just say, hey, do I need to do my own thing? Or would it be better if there were 100 projects that 3 or 4 of us were collaborating on, working together to make great things for Zine Quest in the future? But either way, I think getting that group together to do some kind of jam would be an absolute blast. So Phil, thank you so much for coming on. I think my last question for you, maybe my last 2 questions are, do you get to play games ever? Like, do you get to play games?
Not as often as I would like, especially since we're all trapped at home these days. But we manage. In terms of play testing, I actually play test almost every day of the week because we've got a development meeting, and like we created the random fun generator at the office last year, which is a book of dice games. And that was created because we were all at home trying to figure out, hey, what can we be doing through video chat? And what we figured out we could do were fun little dice games as long as everybody had their own dice. And what we've been doing now is playtesting the games for the second book.
That's awesome. And I did back that up. So I was just flipping around looking for it. I couldn't find it, but I do have my my craps dice and my hex dice, sitting here right next to me. And so, phenomenal campaign, super fun. It
went so much bigger than I expected.
Yeah.
And it was 4,000 backers, and I did not expect that at all.
Well, I think accessibility, people's ability to get family members to play who maybe never have played a game before, and the nostalgia of dice games. Like, I think we forget lots of times that dice games are some of the earliest games that we see that were not physical play. And I think there's something just very human about the desire to, make the math rocks go clicky clack. And so, Now, we talked a little bit before we went live. I don't know that I said it on air, but I don't know that Plus One EXP would exist if Steve Jackson Games didn't exist, or if I hadn't discovered Steve Jackson Games. When though I had a desire to do role playing from the time I opened, got to play a red box that we stole from somebody's teenage brother of D&D back in the day. But my first major campaign I ever played in was a GURPS campaign. You would be hard pressed for me to not convince me that if I'm not going to go light and gonzo and OSR, that GURPS isn't what I want to play a certain genre in. Because I do enjoy the intensity and crunchiness of character creation that GURPS provides. And then the absolute lighthearted roll 3d6 and when in doubt, roll and shout of play, So that's been hugely influential on who I am as a designer, as a gamer, and really launched me into the world of RPGs intensely. And so I'm super grateful to that. How do you decide when a game is something that you want to develop as a personal project, or when it's time to say, hey, maybe I should take this to this team and see if it's something we can develop into a bigger game?
A lot of it is just gut instinct. Some things just feel like they're office projects, and some things that feel like they should be a personal project actually turn into an office project shortly down the line. Actually, I've got one laying here. A really good example of that is the gelatinous game.
That's what I was actually looking for it because it was on my desk. I can see it back here.
I thought would be a personal project, but the more I played with it, the more it felt like it had the potential and feel to actually be a Steve Jackson Games project. So I took it into the office and we played it a few times with everybody. And yeah, it was a really good company project.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of nice.
Yeah. And again, I even talk about the idea of, materials influencing design. And you guys have been getting really creative with rule books and doing some experimentation, like the street craps dice were just like a QR code on the back that Googles street craps for you, and then that's the rules. And the first 3 times I did it, I was like, this isn't taking me to a PDF. What's happening? And I was like, oh no, it's just Googling the rules because it's just a funny product where they've got brown and yellow dice that are street craps. Yeah. No, but
actually to the let me Google that for you site or something.
Yeah. And so this project has all the rules on a dice bag, which I think, the concept of minimalist RPGs, which I know we both are fans of, people should think about, can I just fill a bag with dice and then put all the rules on a bag as a medium for communicating what your game is and how it goes, which this is not a role-playing game. This is a dice stacking game, but it's a super fun project that I watched it go from personal to, oh wait, no, this came out with Steve Jackson Games. I thought this was just one of Phil's things. And so that's, like I said, it's just kind of fun. So some of those evolve, and is that you sharing them with people? Is that you thinking about, hey, the scope of this could be bigger than what I can just put out? Where do those come from?
Exactly. A lot of it comes down to just having a feeling that this might be a better fit for the company and have more potential that way. So Steve and I talk regularly. I'll be showing him things I'm working on, and if he sees something that catches his eye, then we'll play with it that way. Like I put together the Infinite Arena for the fantasy trip last year with him, and that came out from, I had an idea and I was talking to him about it. I'm like, I think this might be a good fit for the fantasy trip, and he said, yeah, go for it. And if he had been like, no, I don't think so, then I would have just done it myself or something else.
Yeah. I would love to get somebody to come run Fantasy Trip on a stream for us one time, somebody from the office. It would be a blast to be able to showcase that game, because I backed it. It's sitting right over here off camera, and I'm not going to go get all the different pieces that come with the giant box of Fantasy Trip that I got. Yeah. But it's a phenomenal game. If nobody's ever checked it out, and if you track back into the roots of some of the stuff that Steve Jackson Games has done in the realm of RPGs, you'll be surprised that if you're an old Gronard, if you're an OSR guy who's been in it forever, you'll recognize all the titles. Absolutely. If you're somebody who has been getting into old school role playing recently, and you go back and you look at when some of these games were coming out and the influence they were having, I think you'll be surprised that a lot of them are not much more popular today than they are. And Fantasy Trip, I think, is one of those games for me. I'm always surprised that people haven't played it and are not aware of it. I even walked up yesterday and my son was using one of the giant play mats as a big mouse and keyboard pad for his streaming setup. And I was like, that is not yours. He's like, well, I needed a pad and I went downstairs and got it. I was like, it's not yours. You can't have it. So, but yeah, it's a phenomenal project. But I love that there's that collaborative process. I love that that Steve Jackson Games is a place where when someone has an idea, there's a desire to promote it and say, hey, can we do this? And if it's not, then it's like, no, that's your idea. Go and run with it. And have fun. And I think that's a balance a lot of people would struggle with. But I think just watching the way Steve Jackson Games operates and the way that y'all operate in your friendship too, like it's really cool to kind of things that you think the design community should be kind of confronting and thinking about right now, which I know is a big kind of like, 9,000-foot question. But if you were the interviewer, what are the questions that you think people should be discussing or having conversations about right now?
How do we make these games even easier? How do we make them so simple that they don't intimidate most people? I mean, as popular as D&D is right now, it's still an intimidating mass of information to look at. Like, you walk into a bookstore or something and here's this 3-foot wall of books, and that's just scary. I mean, and even the starter sets for D&D, I mean, what are those, like 40 and 60 page books or something? That's a lot of homework to ask somebody to do before they can play a game. And if our entire industry is based around, oh, somebody else will teach me, that's not great. We need smaller, simpler, faster games just to help get people over the fear of trying to learn these games.
Because when you learn a system, actually, I remember like I got a copy of Strange Synergy, great Steve Jackson game product from back in the day, and sat down with the rule book, and a couple of my friends were looking at the piece and they were watching me read it, and I was like, well, just give me 30 minutes to read the rules. And I sat down and read the rules for 30 minutes, and I sat down and taught them all how to play the game, and they're like, how did you digest that much information in that period of time? Because it is a complex game. Like, it's not an easy game. And they were like, you should do this for a living. And at that time I was like, wow, who would ever hire me to do anything game related? But just to be able to sit down and teach the game to them in 30 minutes, they were amazed by, because once you're in play, it's easy, but you have to know the context. With GURP, same thing I talked about. Like, I don't hand a first time player a character generation process. I say, here's a few pre-gens, or what type of character do you want to play? Here, we'll cross this thing off, write these things, and here's what you can do. And I put it on an index card, and it's like, you're going to roll 3d6 and try to roll under. And when you roll damage, you're going to roll 2d. That's it. Like, that's the core that you need to know to play this game, because I don't want you to know that there are a billion source books from 3rd and 4th edition that you could be digging through. And I think I see that in your design. You constantly kind of gravitate towards games that have a minimalist. We see Morkborg, and a lot of people will critique it as not being much of a game, but that's the point. Like, that's the ideal. That's what they've done,
That's my favorite part. I hate games where everybody thinks everything has to be perfectly balanced and level in some way. And I disagree with that entirely. If the GM can imagine it, it happens.
Yeah, I love it. Do you think we'll see some of that in Steve Jackson Games at some point in the future? Do you think we're going to see some lighter and other systems coming out?
I don't know. I have to tread carefully at this point, because I shouldn't talk about things that we haven't.
I always tell, like I said, I told you beforehand, we don't have to cover safety rules, but I will give you the option to just not talk about things you can't talk about also too.
Stay tuned.
That's a great response. Well, I love it. It looks like we had a little bit of a stream issue there, so I may have to stitch this last couple of minutes onto the main video. But it's been an absolute pleasure getting to talk to you. If people want to track Tower of Scoundrels or your other projects, I've got your Kickstarter follow profile right below your face on the stream. And I know that you've got an Instagram page that you don't use very often, except for when you're posting out about vacation stuff or battle. Is it battle grip stuff?
Toys, yes.
Toys, yeah. And so, but I would still highly encourage people who are into this kind of stuff to check out your work, to follow you. And I've really appreciated you being willing to come on today. It was fun to say, you were like, hey, I don't have time to run it per se, but we could do an interview. And I was like, you know what? We don't have an interview concept yet, so let's make one just for Phil Reed, King of Kickstarter, breaker of binding, soon to be Titan of tabletop tunes. And so I was
experiment with a new format.
I was going to have you on. Let's both wave at the camera until I toss up a graphic, and then take the stream off. So bye everybody. Thanks for watching.